It's a wonderful day in the homiehood, a wonderful day for a homie. Won't you be my homie to Taro? Today is March 2nd, and we are about to dig into the news. We are keeping time. Thank you so much, Ribert. I really do appreciate that because we try to keep it under 20 minutes. So let's dig into today's Canadian headlines and hot takes. Olympian Charmaine Crooks has been named the interim president of Canada Soccer. This is a story we've been following. Earlier in the week, Nick Bontis resigned because there has essentially been a labor crisis amongst the men's and women's teams. So the women have not been paid for their 2022 participation, like at all, I guess. That's like an entire year of not getting paid. I don't even know how anybody could ever justify that. An amount that hinges on what the men agree to, which is also strange because saying that, well, we're only going to pay you depending on what the men get paid is a little weird, right? Given both sides have agreed to pay equity is to be at the heart of the new agreements. Okay, well, in that sense, I suppose it's good. That includes the US $9 million the men earned for their participation in Qatar. It is nice to see the men standing in solidarity in this case, saying, hey, the women work just as hard as us. Why don't they get paid just as much as us? Especially because the men's team is worse, even if they have access to more funds because the world be like that. The women want the same backing and preparation ahead of their World Cup this summer as the men did before Qatar. She also face talking about Crooks here, the new interim leader, could face opposition in a May election, but her credentials are really impressive. She is a member of the Order of Canada. She is a 5-time Olympian and silver medalist from the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics as a member of the 4x400-meter relay team. The first Canadian woman to run the 800 meters in under 2 minutes, Crooks has won gold medals at World Cups and Pan American Games and the Commonwealth Games. So that's really cool. She's also a black woman, so I think she could potentially bring a strong intersectional lens to this position. And it does go into more details about her work history there. She says that the job ahead for our organizations, our sport, and for the players who wear our Canadian jersey is as important to me as any race I've competed in, Crooks said in a statement. I know and understand the calls to get this right, and I am certain that we will be able to deliver real progress for our national teams all the way down to our grassroots. So, some words of confidence here, but I mean, I guess the proof will be in the pudding. Canada Soccer noted Crooks is the first woman and the first person of color to lead the organization, so that is potentially a great thing. But will it manifest into change for specifically, I think, the women's soccer team? We will have to see. Canada Soccer threatened legal action when the women's team threatened to go on strike. However, they were saying that they were not in a legal position to do so at that time. However, this argument will no longer be valid given the Ontario labor standard that a legal strike or lockout may begin on the 17th day after a so-called no board notice is issued. So I guess they have given in their notice and a strike may be incoming. In other kind of like pop news, Indigo was the victim of a malware attack that essentially shut down their website and also some of their in-store in-person shopping outlets. On February 8th, Indigo's website was completely taken down by what the company last week admitted was a ransomware attack. Customers continue to face issues accessing their online orders, and for at least around a week, even those shopping in person were affected because the breach has shut down computers in stores as well. So they are saying that they're not going to pay the ransom that this organization called Lockbit is asking for. They're threatening to release a bunch of their employees and former employees' information into the dark web. But they say Indigo says that given we cannot be assured that any ransom payment would not end up in the hands of terrorists or others on sanctions lists, Indigo has determined it would be inappropriate to pay the ransom. We have no indication that there is any risk to customers because of this illegal attack, but hey, there might be risk to their own employees or former employees. They are also saying that this group, Lockbit, is affiliated with Russian organized crime. So maybe that is another kind of little twist in the story, because the tensions obviously with Canada and Russia are at an all-time high. Lockbit is the same group that was behind the cyber attack on the hospital for sick children, or for hospital for sick children in Toronto, for which it later issued a rare apology to sick kids. So even this weird online Russian mafia affiliated online ransomware group is had to issue an apology to sick kids, which is like, it's very okay. I guess they're criminals with a heart. Even that was a step too far. They decided not to do a cyber attack on children who are like dying from diseases. That, so there is hope for the world. RBC CEO is saying that remote work is hurting productivity and innovation. So this is something that has been an interesting topic of conversation. Like, is remote work good? Personally, as someone who's streaming live from their own basement right now, I'm a big fan of remote work, and I'm not a huge fan of office culture. Um, if you can call it culture at all. The CEO of RBC is, who obviously has a vested interest and a pretty obvious bias, I think, is saying society isn't back together enough. I don't know, which is just kind of sounds stupid. And all CEOs in every sector I talk to are struggling with the balance of developing talent, promoting talent, building culture, creating productivity. It's tough. We don't have the final model yet. Um, okay. I guess this is like a weird thing. I can't say I know a lot about like how an office should function, or what creating culture in an office should look like. All I know is that if you have to go in a couple times a week to the office and you get to work from home a couple times a week from the office, you probably really appreciate those days where you're working from home. So even if you're doing like a 50-50 split office and home, it's basically like, oh, your days at home are probably so much easier. You don't have to commute. You don't have to deal with like your coworkers in the same sense. Like, you maybe have to meet with them online, but you don't have to like deal with their antics or anything like that. Your boss isn't there looking over your shoulder. And the thing is, like, what the stats have shown, as far as I've seen previously, is that productivity is up when people get to work from home. So this article does give the game away a bit here at the end, saying that the issue is also weighing on commercial real estate. In part, higher interest rates are putting pressure on investments in the sector and on loan demand. In addition to that trend, if employees continue to opt to work from home, demand for office space could fall. RBC Chief Risk Officer Graham Hepworth said on a call. So I think what is really going on here is that the properties that they've invested in are now no longer worth the same. So yes, that is my exact thought, Ribert, is that, you know what, they need a way to stimulate downtown. They need a way to also solve the housing crisis. Why don't they just turn these office buildings into apartment buildings or condos? Like, if they need people to go to work so bad, why don't they just sell the buildings, or retrofit them so that they can house people instead? We know that we need this space, so it's just a ridiculous notion that, hey, why don't we just force people to go back to the office, because that will be the thing to save these buildings and save the businesses where all these folks like eat their lunch or get their coffee in the morning. It's just like we need to eventually like rearrange society and make it work for people, right? Instead of expecting people to work 8-hour days and commute 30 minutes or 45 minutes each way, why don't we just house folks because that is a larger priority. So, finishing up here, it says it's not going to be a return to pre-pandemic levels either, so there will be some dislocation. There will be companies like us that release some real estate. I don't think we'll have 100% of the portfolio we had before. We're finding our way towards that, and it's a balance that creates an overall environment that's constructive. So, this is RBC, the largest bank in Canada, and they're just saying that what we want to hold on to as much of our property as we can, and that might mean forcing people back to work, in the in and saying that we really miss um office culture. I guess I don't know. Nobody has ever told me that the culture in their office is just like so fun and amazing. Conditions for migrant workers in New Brunswick seafood industry are abusive and dangerous, a new report says. So this is a great kind of look into the problem with migrant workers, which is to say, actually, the problem with Canada and Canadian businesses who exploit migrant workers for their labor. It's really kind of disheartening to know that this is a practice that is commonplace in Canada. A new report reveals rampant verbal abuse, dangerous working conditions, overcrowded housing, and exploitative recruitment practices among migrants working in seafood plants in New Brunswick during the COVID-19 pandemic at a time when the industry saw record profits. So, not only are they exploiting more people and keeping them in these horrible conditions, but they're also seeing record profits. Now, this is something that just grinds my gears when we talk about inflation, because the cost of the things that we buy here in Canada are also offset by the cheap labor, whether it's imported and goes on in Canada. Those migrant workers are not entitled to the same labor rights that we are as Canadian citizens, or that labor is being used, being fulfilled very cheaply in other countries abroad. So when we talk about inflation and the real price of goods, like we don't pay the real price of goods, and it's just like ridiculous that we complain about things being so expensive when really it's other countries and other groups of labor that are forced to offset the price that we pay. Um, we can't have that in the 21st century, said Raluca Bajan, an assistant professor of social work at Dalhousie University. This shouldn't be happening anymore, not in a country that prides itself on an international level of in terms of human rights. And I guess, I mean, do we pride ourselves in that? I feel like maybe we do, but should we? I don't think so, because we have a lot of problems in Canada when it comes to human rights. A new report based on interviews with 50 migrant workers who arrived in New Brunswick after the start of the pandemic in 2020 described a widespread atmosphere of verbal abuse and harassment in fish plants, a lack of health and safety training, few breaks during long shifts, and bosses who use threats of deportation to stop people from complaining about the working conditions. Workers paid high recruitment fees, up to $11,000, to secure a work permit. They were lodged in houses with up to 20 people, where some slept on the floor and had no access to hot water. And now keep in mind, this is a time when COVID is going on. Imagine living in a house with 20 people and you can't even wash your hands with hot water. It's pretty unsafe, if you ask me. And there are people who are willing to make this sacrifice in order to get some money that they can bring back home to their home country. So there's a lot of money people are making on the backs of migrant workers. Dr. Bajan says, we're also eating this food. Who gives us the right to extract labor from other countries and benefit from this labor without actually providing the rights and benefits to the workers that they should have for doing this labor? And so, yeah, it is a broken system. And there are 12 recommendations being made here. Establish a minimum labor practice standard for provinces participating in the temporary foreign workers program, and a regulatory regime for recruiters, among others. So yeah, obviously it's ridiculous that we don't have a standard labor practice across Canada for migrant workers, and it truly is appalling. Super sad. Speaking of more human rights abuses, This is a little update on the ongoing genocide of First Nations people in Canada. Indigenous community accuses Imperial Oil Alberta government of covering up an industrial leak. For almost a year, water tainted with dangerous levels of arsenic, dissolved metals, and hydrocarbons has been seeping from tailings at the Kearl Oil Sands project in Alberta's north north soaking Alberta's north. Sorry, I'm having a little trouble reading today. Alberta's north soaking into muskeg, public lands and waterways that are home to wildlife and fish. Then, last month, a drainage pond at the site overflowed, spilling an estimated 5.3 million liters of industrial wastewater laced with pollutants into the environment, but a local indigenous community downstream from the site says it was kept in the dark until then. So this is the Athabasca Chippewayan First Nation, and Chief Alan Adams told the Globe and Mail that neither the oil company responsible for the leak nor Alberta's energy regulator notified him or his council of the extent of the problem until after the pond overflowed in February into Crown lands in the remote area about 70 kilometers north of Fort McMurray. So this is falling on the Alberta Energy Regulator, who failed to notify them, and Imperial Oil Resources Limited, who is responsible for this leak. It's honestly super sad, but the First Nation is now considering legal action against the company and the regulators over the contamination, which has left its members unable to exercise their treaty rights to hunt and fish on traditional lands. So basically, they're unable to access food during this time because everything has been contaminated, including the water. It Reading this article a bit more, we have to move on because we're running out of time. But reading this article a bit more, you will find out that they essentially knew that this was a risk, and they, in 2007, they knew that this type of incident was a possibility. Imperial Oil warned at the time that the ground on which the tailings ponds were to be built was permeable, and its understanding of the underlying surface was not yet complete. The response that we're getting out from Imperial Oil is that they regretted to see this, and they're putting in mitigation measures, and they'll be monitoring from now on, and like they're increasing the monitoring. So what you're not hearing, of course, is, hey, we're going to be accountable and we're going to set this right with the First Nation. We're not hearing that, and like my guess is that they won't do something like that until they feel like they're legally liable and are being forced to do it. Okay, lastly for today, we're going to update on the war against China. This is again from Robert Fife and Stephen Chase. They've been slowly dripping out information, trying to sensationalize this story. Trudeau Foundation returning donation with a link to China. So as we heard the other day, there was $200,000 that was given to the Trudeau Foundation, which was set up in the name of Pierre Elliott Trudeau. They apparently they only got $140,000 and the two payments of $70,000, and they are planning to return that $140,000. So, Mrs. Thomas, who is the where is it? When Jody Thomas, the National Security Advisor to Mr. Trudeau, Mrs. Thomas said that some of the officials, including Mrs. Thomas, testified, but they are bound by secrecy by the Security of Information Act. So we're not going to get the full story here, even if people testify. Ms. Thomas, however, expressed concerns that whistleblowers leaked highly classified CSIS documents viewed by the Globe about Chinese election interference tactics. And as we heard yesterday, those leaks from CSIS were not enough to meet a threshold. At least a committee has found they were not high enough to meet a threshold that constituted election interference, and they did not change the outcome of the election. So this whole thing to me really feels like a giant nothing burger. But we're sensationalizing it because we're beating the war drums against China. And again, we don't know where this CSIS leak is coming from. Obviously, Justin Trudeau has a vested interest in finding where the source is leaking from. So it's kind of curious what's going on. To me, it does feel like maybe CSIS is interfering with our upcoming election, because if this is not meeting the threshold of election interference from China, then why is it being sensationalized in this way? It's something that Pierre Trudeau, sorry, not Pierre Trudeau, but Pierre Poilievre is capitalizing on. The Conservatives, oh wait, where's Trudeau? Poilievre here. Conservatives will support efforts to get to the bottom of this, including supporting a truly independent public inquiry, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre told reporters. But Mr. Poilievre said an inquiry head must be agreed upon by House leaders of three major parties, and its work should be not interfered with current committee hearings. So of course, this is something that's a huge partisan issue, and if they appoint someone who has a bias, whether it's toward the Liberals or the Conservatives or whoever, it's not going to go off in a fair way. Anyways, the NDP is setting a motion today, and the House committee is going to vote on it to call on the Prime Minister to set up a public inquiry into Chinese interference in the 2019 and 2021 elections. So the NDP, Jagmeet Singh, is also positioning around this. Some people are saying, hey, this is a good way for the NDP to distance themselves from the Liberals. I personally, I don't know how I feel, because I feel like this entire story has been super sensationalized. I think that the NDP, it might have been better for them to call for concessions from the Liberal Party, who they are in an agreement with. I kind of do wish, the thing that bothers me the most is that proportional representation voting is not being talked about at all, and that is really frustrating, because hey, if we want fairer elections, why don't we do electoral reform? This is something that's part of the NDP's platform, but they have yet to bring it up at all in their agreement with the Liberals. I feel like now is the time to bring it up, and what are we going to find as a result of this inquiry? Probably nothing, because it's been a nothing burger so far. It just might be more sensationalized media for weeks and months and even years to come, because honestly, it is a process that could take more than a year. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for getting the news here on My Homie Tutaro. This is headlines and hot takes. If you made it this far, I do have a question for you. The question of the day is, what is the weather where you are at? Just look out your window right now. It doesn't even matter. Just tell me, what is it like outside? Is it cloudy? Is it sunny? Is it raining? Is it snowing? What is it like where you're at? So thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe and share and comment and do all the nice things. It really helps my channel grow, and I appreciate that so much. Adios.